Hey, what's going on, everyone? Val Barakat here. I'm a CEO and co-founder at Sun Solar Solutions. We are installing EPC in Arizona and Nevada. Wanted to do a quick follow-up on a few videos that I did. It's been about 4 years now on how APS really and TEP here in Arizona with the way that without the net metering, kind of how they work. And APS just had a massive change. And their rates and some changes to the solar. And so again, want to just kind of follow up, do a shorter video on these changes and kind of how that impacts solar and how that impacts your customers from the standpoint of what happens when they go solar, right? What's the new remaining bill and what does that look like? So if you haven't had a chance to look at the or to watch the older videos, they were posted back in 2020. You can access them at solartruth.com. That'll actually have links on there to the YouTube. They're all on YouTube. It's had a few thousand views on those, so hopefully those have been useful. But a lot of things have changed since 2020, right? Here in Arizona, we don't have net metering for the most part, the major utilities anyway. And what we have is something called RCP, which is Retail Comparison Proxy. And that's just APS's way of basically, it's like a buyback program where they're buying back power from whatever you overproduce from your solar system, and they give you a rate that's lower than what they're charging you. And so that buyback rate typically goes down every year by about 10%. Customers are locked in for 10 years at the buyback rate that the tranche that they get into or the tier that they get into. But every year that it goes down, it affects what happens once you go solar, right? So the last time I did this video was back in 2020. And so that has dropped a few times since then. And not only has that dropped, but the rates that APS charges customers has gone up. And so the bigger the delta between the two, between what they charge you and what they pay you, right, the more effect that has on what your APS bills look like with solar, right? Like what is your average monthly bill after solar? So again, the other video has a lot more information that really kind of goes into details of the mechanics of all that. It's a lot more technical. This one, I kind of want to jump right into the APS rates, what changes were there, and what do the new remaining bills at different percentage of offsets look like. So let me go ahead and share my screen here. All right. So again, we'll jump right into the rates. The news, I've heard anywhere from 8% increase, 10% increase, 11% increase. From what I can tell, that's probably a talk track or just kind of information that's being passed along from the utility to homeowners. Looking at the actual rates looks a little bit different. What we're seeing, let me go ahead and switch over to that. And here's basically the rate sheets. And this is the scheduled time of use with APS. It's called a TOUE. And it's basically, the majority of homeowners that we run into are on this plan, either this one or the one that's with the demand rate. And they both have similar increases. So APS, if you're in this market, the APS bill has a ton of line items. But basically, it's this section here talks about what the actual rates are. So there's a bunch of other fees. There's other taxes that aren't even on here. But this is it for the most part. And so if you take a look at it, and you do the math, right? So now we're it went up to about 35 cents on peak in the summer, 33 cents in the winter. We'll dive a little bit more into those details. But something else that's also new, it's kind of what's old is new again. They've re-implemented a grid access charge on solar customers only. So back in 2017, net metering ended in Arizona, and they had a 93 cents per installed kilowatt as a fee. So a 10 kilowatt system was about a $9.30 fee. 2 years ago, they actually took that away because there was some opposition to it, and they came up with like, look, there's no justifiable reason to charge a solar customer extra fee that other people don't have to pay, because they're not any more or less a drain on the grid. If anything, they're less of a drain actually, because they're producing a lot of their own power. And so, there shouldn't be this specific fee. Well, somehow this came back. It is lower than before. It used to be 93 cents. Now it's about 26 cents. So a 10 kilowatt system's about $2.60 a month. So it's not a huge amount, but it adds up, right? Every few dollars adds up over the years. And it also kind of sets a precedent for the future rates, right? So that's kind of what's new there. So that they increased the rates on peak, off peak for both summer and winter, and they added this new grid charge. So if we actually dive into the rates, everything basically went up here. So your basic service charge went from 40 cents a day to 46.3 cents a day, which is a 16% increase. The summer went up from around 29.7, about 30 cents is what it used to be, to about 35 cents, which is a 17% increase. Winter went up from about 28 to 33. And then the off peak went up from around 11 to about 12 and a half in the summer. And in the winter from around 10.8 up to around 12 and a half cents a kilowatt hour. So as you can see, percentage wise, the rates are 16 to 17% increase. And then again, you have this new grid access charge. Okay. And so, as I was mentioning earlier, the big thing here is that, typically, obviously, as rates go up, in solar, hey, you gotta go solar because the rates are going up, right? And what we actually find is that it is true from the standpoint of savings are actually increased a little bit. Okay, so somebody that's doing solar, with the new rates versus the old rates is actually going to save a little bit more money than they were before. Okay. And that's because obviously, a good portion of your bill is covered by solar. And so therefore it's not affected by the increased utility rates. But if you don't have net metering, then a lot of your bill is not covered. Okay. So here in Arizona, if you're doing about 100% system, you're only going to use about 45% of your solar directly, because we produce a lot of solar in kind of the spring before it gets too hot. The better months here are really April, May, June, right? Are kind of a really good months. Once August, September comes around, July, August, September, then it gets so hot that actually negatively affects the production. And so again, homeowners are using about 45%, and there's a lot more information on the mechanics of that in the other video. I'll probably do something at the end of this to just kind of do a recap if you do want to stick around for the end and kind of learn a bit more about the mechanics of why that is. But essentially, again, the rates are going up 16-17%. So people's bills are going to be much, much higher than they were before, right? This summer, especially, they're going to be really high. And so if you're going solar, you're gonna actually save a little bit more money than you did prior to this rate increase. Okay. But the big difference is that the remaining bill with a solar system here in APS is also going to go up dramatically. Okay. Now the regular bills are going up even more, but again, setting that correct expectation is super, super important. We find, we run into these kind of situations out there where, homeowners have the incorrect expectations. They might have been told, hey, it's just going to be a small fee. If you do 120%, 125, 130, we hear that a lot. Where homeowners' expectation are kind of that they're really not going to have a bill, especially maybe for 5, 6, 7 months of the year, and then maybe have some summer bill. And so a lot of that was true in the past, and a lot of it probably maybe even stems back to 3, 4 years ago. But a lot has changed. Again, the rates have gone up twice since then. They went up in 2022. They just went up again. And then the buyback rate has dropped several times since then. So here on this next slide, this is basically showing before. So this is 2020. So back in 2020, if you did 100% system, okay, then your remaining bill would be anywhere from around $50 a month on average up to about $80, right? Depending on your system size. So 7 kilowatt up to about 14 kilowatt, right? So about $50 to $80 a month, about 600 to, close to $1,000 a year. That was on a 100% system. And then if you went up to about 130, that will leave you with a pretty minimal bill on average, right? $10 to $15. And then 140 used to really kind of zero out your bill, right? Like you would build up so many credits between February, March, April, May, right? And June into that time frame, you'd have hundreds and hundreds of dollars of credit that then when you did get a bill in August, July, August, September, you had enough credits that would knock all that out, right? But again, that has changed a lot because rates have increased from APS, and the buyback rate, the export rate that they pay you for solar you send back to the grid has gone down a lot. So let's compare. This was, again, about 4 years ago. 100% meant about a $50 to $80 bill. if we take a look at, this is with the new rates that just went up, okay? And so now you're looking at a 7 kilowatt system here, and this is with somebody's usage, so I did a range here of, kind of lower usage in Arizona. 12,000, is on the lower end. 17.5 is about a midpoint, and then obviously it's a little bit of a heavier user, although we see a lot of customers using this, right? So it's going to be somewhere in between here, and you should only have customers that are using more than this. And so this is about a pretty average size system in this range. And I basically, it's a southwest facing system. So we built all this calculator. Again, if you haven't had a chance to look at the old videos, check that out. Again, it's solartruth.com, and you'll be able to kind of dig into the details. But going back to this, you've got now at 100% system anywhere from around $80 a month all the way up to about $160 a month on an average bill if you sell somebody a quote unquote 100% system. Okay. And so again, going back to 2020, it was around 50 to 80. Now it's around 80 to 160. Okay. And so, and obviously there's a little bit of a range. These are estimates, right? We have our calculator basically goes off of if somebody's has a lower usage on peak versus a higher usage on peak, right? So actually higher here, lower here, right? So depending on what it is, obviously if it's, all west, it's going to be a little bit different. You're going to get a little bit better because your time frame for on peak is 4 to 7. And so you're going to get a little bit better performance, but of course, then you're going to need a bigger solar system if it's all west facing because it's less efficient. So your APS bill will go down a bit, but your solar payment is going to go, more than actually what your bill is going to go down. So that's what it looks like now on 100%. Okay, and as you can see here, the other thing that's really important to note with APS is whenever we talk about these numbers and we present somebody with a homeowner and say, hey, your average bill is going to be around $80, $90. Really important to mention that average, because if not, if you take a look at what happens in the summer, right? Take a look at August, somebody whose average bill is around $85 to $90 is going to get around $190 bill in August. Okay, here out of a 10 kilowatt, 17,500 usage, about a $263 bill, and then you get up in this range, and they're going to get a bill of $360 in the summer. Okay, and so even here, if you're telling them your average bill is around $150, they're going to remember that number. And when they get a $360 bill, they're probably going to be calling you like, hey, you told me it was $150. Okay. Now, obviously, a way to combat that is, and I've done this a couple of times jokingly, I think, where, it's like, hey, what about March? It was 23. How come you didn't call me then? That was a 150, right? And so, it is important, again, to have that discussion and make sure, hey, this is an average bill. It is going to differ from Arizona, about $20 in the spring, up to over $300 in order to set that right expectation. So that's what it looks like at 100%. Let's go ahead and take a look at 125, which we see a lot of people in this market offering 125% offset and kind of setting an expectation that, they either won't have a bill for about 6 months of a year and then a, low bill, and obviously low subjective, right? We might think low is $100 and the homeowner might think low is 20. Okay. So important to set that right expectation. So if I go to 125, now you'll notice at 125, on a 7 kilowatt, 125% offset, you're looking at about $60-$70. 10 kilowatt, 80 to 90. 14 kilowatt, 100 to about $120. And in this scenario, you do now have some months where there's no bill. Okay, but then it still gets up to about $300 in the summer, and that's on the bigger 14 kilowatt. On a 7 kilowatt, it's about zero. It never really gets negative. About $1. And then it goes up to about $150 in the summer. So if we step it up one more, 160 was the previous sort of a zeroed out bill prior to this rate increase. Okay. So remember, going back here, 2020, 140 was basically the zero out. Okay. Then in 2022, when the rates went up, 160 was the new 140, if you will, right? Where it meant like a zeroed out bill. Well, now a 160 system will get you an average bill for anywhere from about $30 on a smaller usage house up to around, $45, $50, $60 average on a 14 kilowatt. And this is, again, now you do have about, you've got 4, 5, 6 months of pretty low bills, right? Or no bill at all. And then you run out of those credits, and then you start getting bills, and then you're looking at $100 to about $200, right? So then the question is, what is the new zeroed out bill? So it went from 140 to 160. Now you're really looking at about $195, 195%, offset if you want to kind of zero out an APS bill. Okay. So you're talking about, here, like basically, and this doesn't mean they're going to get money back. This is just credits building up in their account. And then the way it works here in Arizona is as the summer hits, your system is not going to produce enough, right? And so you start eating into those credits that you built up. And so that's what you're seeing here. Like they have a credit of $7.46. It gets all the way up to $226. And now your June bill is larger than what it produced in credits. And so you basically ate through some of those credits. You had 226, now you got 192. July, you ate through more of those credits, you're down to 111. August, you ate another, $90 of those credits, you're down to 21. And then you're actually going to get a bill here, in September. And then, it'll kind of zero out again by the end. Anything over $25, they'll actually send you a check. So here you wouldn't get a check, it will roll over to January. Here you actually get a check of $41, and here you get a check of $122. Okay, so obviously, again, these are estimates. They are pretty in line though. So they're not gonna differ a lot. Like this says 82 to 94. Again, if somebody's super low on peak usage, so on this basically assumes about a 10% on peak, all the way to about a 20% on peak, right? Because our on peak window is only 3 hours. It's 4 to 7. And so if somebody's only using like 5% on peak instead of 10, this might drop into, $70, right? But again, you're still in that range. You're in that ballpark of, I would say, 10 to 15% of this number, right? It's up or down. And then again, if your system's a little bit more efficient, might get a little bit better, but it's certainly not going to be anywhere where if you're doing 100% system, somebody's going to have a, no bill at all. Like all of these at 100%, they're going to get hit with a bill every month, and they're not really going to have a month at all where they're not getting an APS bill. It could be very low in the 20s, maybe under 20, and then you're certainly going to hit, nearly $200, $250, nearly $400 in the summer. So, going back again to the rates. So this actually happened this past Thursday. It was a 11-hour ordeal down at the Corporation Commission. Long. Started at 9 o'clock, ended about 9 o'clock in the morning. It ended about 8 p.m. They basically passed everything that APS asked for. It officially goes into effect on March 1st. But obviously any customer you're selling today is going to be affected by this already, because by the time their solar is installed and PTO'd, these new rates are in effect. Okay. And they're going to be seeing some really high bills. So they're going to be motivated to go solar, probably more than ever, which is the plus side, right? So the good news here is that the savings is still there. They're actually saving a little bit more money than they were before. But again, it is important to make sure you're setting the right expectations, based on what the new results are, right? With that increased rate, and the buyback rate staying the same. That didn't go up or down, but the delta between the two, right? The amount they charge you versus the amount they pay you got wider, and that's why we're seeing this effect of a larger bill. So I wanted to go over that super quick with everybody. Just share that knowledge out there. Hopefully that provides value to you guys, and you guys are setting the right expectations. Like I said at the beginning, I'm going to go ahead and dive a little bit. If you didn't have a chance to see the other video, I'll do kind of, again, I'm not going to go nearly as deep as the other one. The other one is probably about an hour or so of really diving into the mechanics of why it works this way here in Arizona. But I'll go ahead and do it on here just super quick on kind of a recap, okay? So this is something that our office, we built this back in 2017 when net metering ended, to kind of really figure out how does solar work now, right? Because it's a completely different thing of how it worked, and obviously we're seeing something similar with NEM 3.0 in California, right? Where now it's not a one-to-one; they're paying you back a different rate, and so that has massive implications on how solar works, and so we built out this calculator. The way this calculator basically works is it takes, and it's built off of a large database of customers. Obviously, it is using averages, but we've got over 10,000 customers here in Arizona that we've helped, and we have a lot of data on this. And so we've taken inputs of a lot of solar systems, and what this tab here is doing, it's taking an hour by hour for the entire year, right? Of how much an average solar system produces depending on the size of the system. So these numbers will actually change as we enter in different production. And then it's basically saying, hey, on April 19th, particular solar system is going to produce X amount, right? It's going to produce this much throughout the day. And then you basically have your daily production Actually, yeah, you have your daily production there. So, excuse me. Okay. So that's basically what the inputs does. The results side, basically this spits it out. And this here gets calculated from the month to month. So it's going off the inputs, okay? And then it's taking a month by month of somebody's usage. So this here, we've got different months at the bottom. It's every day of every month. It's basically averaging out of what time is it? What is the rate? What is the house's usage during that time? What's the solar production, netting out one from the other? How much did you use from solar? How many credits did you have? And then what did APS charge you? Okay. And so it's figuring all that out for every hour of the month, every month of the year. And then it basically gives you a result here, right? And this is where we were talking about how much solar is being used. So at 100% system, for this particular situation, you're only using about 33% of the solar, okay, and overall for the year, and you're using and you're buying about 67% from APS, which obviously on the flip side, it means that you are exporting out, you're sending back 67% of your solar production back to the grid, and that's what they're paying you that export rate for. And the reason it's like that, if I go month by month, if I go to January, and I scroll back up here to the top, then you'll see in January, we're only using about 16% of our solar power here in Arizona. Why? Because, January actually there's really good production out here, and people aren't using a lot of electricity, right? We use most of our electricity in the summer because of the AC, right? Starting in May, June, July, August, September, October, right? We're using a lot of that energy. So here we produce a lot of power, but since the AC is not running, there's not a lot of power being used. So most of that's going back to the grid. And obviously, as the year goes on, then we use more of it, right? Here you got 14%. In March, you're using still about 13% only. Then you got about 20 in April. People start turning their ACs on. You got about 25% in May. You got about 50% in June. And then, up in the 60s in July. And then it kind of starts tapering off again. So that's basically how that works. Again, if you want to really dive into the mechanics of why that works that way, then watch the other videos that we did a couple years ago. And this basically this is that calculator. So here you've got, if I increase these, for example, to let's say 25,000 kilowatt hours, okay, you'll actually see that this stuff here starts changing, okay, and now it's kind of showing how much of your solar was used, how much of it was exported. And so here you actually notice that now we're only use 25% of our solar, right? We exported 75%. Now that 25% covered 35% of our usage, but since there's more solar power now, like more of it gets exported out. Like your house, just because you increased how much your solar system produces doesn't mean that your house usage went up. Okay, so you're going to export out even more. Okay, and then we basically have a tab here that shows the customer results, and this is where we get that, right? Like how much is it per month? Like what's their expected monthly bill? So again, that's how that works. If you guys want to see more on that, again, check out solartruth.com. There's a link there to the YouTube videos from a few years ago that dives into all this. But I hope that was helpful with everybody here in Arizona. Take advantage of the information, right? Make sure that you're explaining that correctly to your homeowners. Make sure you have a good understanding of it. And again, this is actually, it's more savings than before, which is a great thing. But we just need to make sure that customers, obviously, with kind of what we're seeing with some of the rules and legislation in other states like Nevada and other states like Utah, it's really more important to make sure that we're getting the right expectations across the homeowners, so that we don't see similar things coming here to Arizona. So hope that was helpful, everybody. See you guys later.